Hello and welcome back to the British Accent Podcast. I'm Emily.
And I'm Nick. Really glad you've joined us for this one, because today we're talking about something most of us deal with quietly, chasing the version of ourselves we think we should be.
Yeah, that invisible script we carry around. The one that says we need to be more accomplished, more confident, more productive, more polished. It's exhausting, really.
And so often, it's not even a version we chose. It's built from expectations, family, school, society, even social media. And we don't stop to ask, do I even want to be that person? Or have I just been taught I'm supposed to?
And when you're constantly chasing who you think you should be, it's easy to lose sight of who you already are. You start performing instead of living. You become a project instead of a person.
Exactly. But there's a shift that happens when you stop. When you just pause. Step off the track. And start getting curious about what actually feels right for you, not just what looks impressive from the outside.
So today we're asking the question, what really happens when you stop chasing that version of yourself? What do you find in the space that's left? And who do you become when you let go of all the pressure to be someone else?
Because maybe the real you, the one underneath all the striving, was never lost. Just buried under everything you thought you had to be.
And once you stop chasing that imagined version of yourself, something strange happens, you start feeling lighter. Not because life suddenly gets easier, but because you're no longer dragging around the weight of shoulds. All those, I should be more this, or I should have done that by now.
Yeah, the silence that follows can feel a bit unsettling at first. You're so used to running towards something, or away from something, that just being still feels almost wrong. But in that stillness, you start to hear yourself more clearly.
You start asking different questions too. Not, how can I fix myself, but what do I actually enjoy, or what makes me feel calm? It's not about self-improvement anymore, it's about self-connection.
And that's a subtle but massive difference. One is driven by lack, the idea that you're not enough yet. The other is grounded in care, curiosity, wholeness. You begin to realize that becoming yourself isn't about reaching somewhere, it's about unlearning.
Unlearning the noise. The pressure. The rules you didn't even know you were following. And it can be uncomfortable. Because part of you might still feel guilty, like you're giving up or falling behind.
But really, you're not falling behind, you're just walking a different path. One that's slower, more honest. One that lets you build a life that fits, rather than constantly trying to squeeze yourself into something that never really did.
And when you let go of the chase, you might find things you never noticed before. Like the parts of you that you've been quieting for years, your gentleness, your creativity, your need for rest. They start to speak up again.
You realize some of the goals you were chasing weren't even yours. Maybe they were someone else's definition of success. Maybe they were just habits built out of fear, fear of not being enough, fear of being left behind, fear of being misunderstood.
And once you stop running, you can ask yourself, what do I want, really? Not what looks good, not what earns praise, but what makes me feel peaceful, even if it's quiet or small or different from what others expect.
It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes we spend so long trying to become someone we're not, just to feel accepted, only to realize that the people who truly care never needed us to change in the first place.
Right? And it's freeing, terrifying, maybe, but freeing to know that who you are without all the effort, without all the performance, might actually be enough. Not just enough, beautifully enough.
It doesn't mean you stop growing. But you grow from a different place. Not from shame, not from pressure, but from clarity. From choice. From self-respect.
And that changes everything. Because you're no longer chasing some distant version of yourself, you're learning to be with the one who's here now. And that, honestly, is where the real becoming begins.
And there's something really powerful about meeting yourself where you are, instead of where you think you're supposed to be. That moment when you stop saying, I'll be happy when, and start asking, can I be kind to myself now?
It's like stepping out of a fog. You start to notice the little things. What makes you feel calm in the morning? What conversations leave you feeling heavy? What kind of pace actually suits your body and mind? It's not about being selfish, it's about being honest.
And honesty, especially with yourself, can feel like a relief. You no longer have to pretend you're always okay, or always motivated, or always performing at 100%. You just get to be. Sometimes messy, sometimes uncertain, but real.
And when you live from that place, life becomes more about alignment than achievement. You choose what feels true, not just what looks impressive. And slowly, that pressure to chase some ideal version of yourself starts to fade.
Because what if who you are, right now, in this moment, isn't something to fix, but someone to listen to? What if you don't need a complete makeover to feel worthy, but just a bit of gentleness? A bit of space to breathe?
And once you give yourself that space, it's wild how much begins to shift. The way you talk to yourself softens. The way you show up in the world feels less like survival and more like expression. Like, this is who I am, and that's enough.
And in that space, even your goals start to evolve. Not because you're giving up, but because you're finally choosing them for you. You're no longer striving out of fear or insecurity, you're moving from a place of intention.
You might realize that some things you were desperate to achieve were actually just stand-ins for something deeper, wanting to feel seen, wanting to feel safe, wanting to feel like you mattered. And once you understand that, the whole shape of your life can change.
Yeah. The focus shifts from, how do I become the best version of myself, to, how do I become the most authentic version of myself? And the latter might not look like success to everyone, but it will feel like truth to you.
It's quieter, gentler, and a lot of people might not get it. But the ones who do, the ones who value presence over perfection, they'll see you more clearly when you see yourself more clearly.
And you start to attract things that fit. Relationships that aren't built on performance. Work that aligns with your values. Even moments of joy that feel real, not forced. That's what happens when you stop chasing who you think you should be.
You come home to yourself. Not the polished, filtered version, but the real, breathing, evolving person underneath. And you learn to say, this is me. Not the version I built to survive. Not the one I perform for others. Just me. And that's enough.
And once you reach that place where you can say, just me, without flinching, without apologizing, it changes your relationship with everything. You stop hustling for belonging. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop waiting for someone else to validate your path.
Because deep down, you realize that the person you were chasing, this perfect, polished, endlessly capable version, was never the point. The point was to find out who you are without all that noise. Who you are when you're not trying so hard.
And maybe that version is softer. Maybe they take longer to figure things out. Maybe they don't have it all together. But they are real. They are whole. And they deserve to be here, just as much as anyone else.
You might not always feel like enough. But you are. Even in your uncertainty. Even on the days when your growth is invisible. Even when all you've done is be. That's still something. That still matters.
Because becoming isn't about turning into someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about coming back to yourself, not the version shaped by pressure, but the one shaped by presence. By truth.
And when you can live from that place, even just a little, it brings a kind of peace that no achievement ever really gave you. Not because you've stopped growing, but because you're finally growing from something real. Something true. Something that's you.
And that kind of growth doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it just looks like choosing differently. Saying no to what drains you. Saying yes to what feels right, even if no one else understands it.
It might look like slowing down when everyone else is speeding up. Or walking away from something that once felt like your whole future. It might even look like disappointing others to stop disappointing yourself.
And it's not always easy. In fact, it rarely is. Letting go of who you thought you were supposed to be means grieving a little. It means sitting with the space that opens up when old dreams fall away.
But that space. It's also where your real self starts to breathe again. It's where clarity sneaks in, soft, quiet, honest. And it's where you start to feel at home in your own skin, maybe for the first time in years.
You stop asking, am I doing enough, and start asking, am I being honest with myself? You stop chasing a timeline, and start listening to your own rhythm. And that shift, it changes everything.
Because when you're no longer performing, you start connecting. With yourself. With others. With life. Not from a place of trying to impress, but from a place of wanting to feel. Wanting to live.
And that's what happens when you stop chasing who you think you should be. You meet the person you actually are. Not the idea. Not the role. The real, present, becoming you kind of human. And you realize, that's more than enough.
And what's beautiful is, once you make peace with that version of yourself, the one that's still figuring things out, still healing, still unfolding, you begin to feel less rushed. Less desperate to arrive somewhere. You give yourself permission to just exist in the in-between.
You start recognizing that becoming isn't some final destination where everything clicks and stays perfect. It's a fluid thing. Some days you feel grounded, other days you feel lost again. But even in that, you're still moving, still growing.
And you stop seeing change as a threat. You stop thinking, if I let go of this version of me, who will I be? And instead start wondering, what else could I discover about myself if I gave it space?
That's the thing about letting go of who you thought you should be. You make space for something more authentic. Maybe even something softer. You begin to trust your own timing, your own journey, without needing it to look like anyone else's.
And slowly, your self-talk changes too. You're less harsh. Less critical. More understanding. You notice when you're tired and rest without guilt. You notice when something doesn't feel right, and walk away without shame. That's growth. Quiet, but powerful.
You build your life differently. Not around what's expected, but around what matters. Around peace. Around alignment. Around self-trust. And that life, your life, starts to feel like it finally fits. Not because you forced it to, but because you let yourself become.
So if you've been feeling worn out from chasing some version of yourself you never actually chose, this is your reminder, you're allowed to stop. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to be exactly who you are right now, even if you're still figuring that out.
And maybe, just maybe, the person you are, without the pressure, without the performance, is already enough. Already worthy. Already whole. Not because you've done everything right, but because you've had the courage to be real.
Thanks for spending this time with us today. If anything we said resonated with you, we hope it stays with you. Not just for today, but in the small choices you make tomorrow, too.
This has been the British Accent Podcast. Take care of yourself, be gentle, and remember, you're not behind. You're becoming. In your own time, in your own way.
We'll catch you again soon. Until then, go easy.